At 65, Fay Emerson died alone in Spain, far from her Hollywood fame. But that's not even the shocking part. Her family just confirmed the real story: a shocking attempt to end herself on Christmas Day, a secret abuse at the actor's studio, and the scandalous wardrobe malfunction that changed TV forever. From Howard Hughes's mysterious gifts to her final days in Spain, we're exposing the painful secrets America's first TV queen took to her grave. Faye Margaret Emerson was born on July 8, 1917, in Elizabeth, Louisiana. She was the fifth child of Lawrence L. Emerson and his wife, Emma. Her father worked as a rancher and court stenographer. Her parents' marriage didn't last long. When Faye was 3, they divorced, changing the course of her childhood. After the separation, she moved frequently. In 1924, she lived with her father and stepmother in Chicago. But life kept shifting. When she turned 10, she relocated to San Diego, California, to live with her mother. This move brought some stability, though challenges remained. Faye attended Point Loma High School in San Diego. Her mother later enrolled her in the Academy of San Luis Rey, a Catholic convent boarding school in Oceanside. It was there that she first discovered a love for performing. At the time, it was just an interest, but that spark would shape her entire future. After high school, she spent a year at San Diego State College. While studying, she became involved in local theater. She joined the San Diego Community Theater and the St. James Repertory Theater, taking part in stock theater productions. These early performances were small, but they gave her experience and confidence. Pursuing acting wasn't easy, especially during the Great Depression. She struggled financially and worked hard to support herself while chasing her dream. In 1935, she made her stage debut in Russet Mantle. It was a modest beginning, but it marked the first step in a career that would soon lead her to Hollywood. Fay Emerson's journey into Hollywood started by chance, but it changed the course of her life. In 1941, while performing in a stock theater production in California, she caught the attention of a Warner Brothers talent scout. At the time, she was still finding her way as an actress after studying at San Diego State College. That one performance led to a contract with Warner Brothers, one of the biggest studios of the era. Her early years in Hollywood were spent in small roles, appearing in films like Manpower and Blues in the Night, both released in 1941. These parts were minor, but they gave her experience in front of the camera and a chance to understand the demands of the film industry. Warner Brothers, always on the lookout for fresh talent, saw her potential and gave her bigger opportunities. That same year, she landed more significant roles in Bad Men of Missouri and 9 Lives Are Not Enough, marking the beginning of her rise in the studio system. In 1942, she got her first starring role in Lady Gangster, a crime melodrama and a remake of the 1933 film Ladies They Talk About, which had originally starred Barbara Stanwyck. Emerson played Dorothy Dot Burton, a bank robber caught during a failed getaway. Sent to prison, Dot had to navigate betrayals from both fellow inmates and old allies. The film followed her struggles, her resilience, and her determination to escape after learning that her former gang planned to harm the man she loved. In a daring move, she broke out of prison disguised in the warden's clothes, proving she was as clever as she was tough. Her performance balanced strength and vulnerability, showing that she could carry a film as its lead. Lady Gangster was a low-budget B-movie, but it was an important step in her career. The following year, she starred in Air Force, one of the most significant films of 1943. Directed by Howard Hughes, the movie followed the crew of a B-17 bomber named Mary Ann as they carried out dangerous missions in the Pacific during World War II. Inspired by real events, Air Force was made to boost morale after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Emerson played the wife of co-pilot Bill Williams, adding emotional depth to a story dominated by war and action. Though her role was small, it gave audiences a reminder of the personal sacrifices made by families back home. The film, released on February 3, 1943, was produced with close cooperation from the U.S. Army Air Forces and even featured real aircraft from Hendricks Army Airfield to make the battle scenes as realistic as possible. Critics praised its gripping storytelling, and it became one of Warner Brothers' most effective wartime dramas. For Emerson, it was another step toward more prominent roles. In 1944, she delivered one of her best performances in The Mask of Demetrios, a film noir directed by Jean Negulesco. The movie, based on Eric Ambler's novel, followed a mystery writer, played by Peter Lorre, who became obsessed with uncovering the life of the enigmatic criminal Demetrios Makropoulos. Emerson played Irana Preveza, one of Demetrios's former lovers, a woman who had once fallen for his charm but had been left betrayed and heartbroken. As a nightclub owner, Irana had seen the darker side of life, and Emerson brought that world-weary quality to the character. Her performance relied on subtle expressions and body language, making Irana feel both alluring and deeply wounded. Though she had less screen time than Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre, or Zachary Scott, her presence left a lasting impact. Her scenes, set against smoky cabaret backdrops, captured the essence of classic film noir, filled with mystery, deception, and moral ambiguity. Fay Emerson never became as famous as some of her contemporaries, but she built a career on strong, memorable performances. She moved between B-movies and higher-profile films, bringing intelligence and depth to her roles. Fay Emerson had already found success in Hollywood by the late 1940s, but television was still a new and uncertain medium. Most movie stars avoided it, unsure if it could match the glamour of film. Emerson saw things differently. In 1948, she stepped into the world of television and quickly became one of its first major stars. She didn't just appear on TV, she embraced it. Her first roles included hosting Paris Cavalcade of Fashions, a show that blended style with entertainment, and starring in anthology series like the Chevrolet Teletheater and the Philco Television Playhouse. These programs were still part of television's experimental phase, yet Emerson's confidence and charisma made her stand out. A year later, she took things a step further. In 1949, The Fay Emerson Show debuted, first on CBS and later on NBC. Running until 1952, it was one of the earliest late-night talk shows and helped define the format long before Johnny Carson or Steve Allen became household names. Emerson's show wasn't just about celebrity interviews. It featured cultural discussions, audience letters, and unexpected moments that kept viewers engaged. One of the most talked-about episodes included Douglas Fairbanks Jr. demonstrating sword-fighting techniques with college fencers. These moments made the show feel fresh and unpredictable. Emerson wasn't just reading off a script, she was creating a conversation. While her charm and intelligence won over audiences, her fashion choices made headlines. She had a signature style, elegant gowns, often low-cut, always glamorous. Some found her outfits too daring for television, but they also set her apart. In one now infamous broadcast, her gown slipped on air, causing a minor scandal and sending newspaper gossip columns into a frenzy. But Emerson never let controversy define her. She carried herself with confidence, proving that television could be both glamorous and sophisticated. By 1950, television was still in its early days. Only 12% of American households owned a TV, according to the census, meaning her audience was relatively small but influential. The people watching were often well-off and eager to embrace the latest trends. Emerson's presence gave television a sense of prestige. She wasn't just a host. She was one of the first real TV stars. That's how she earned the nickname the First Lady of Television. It wasn't just about how often she appeared on screen. It was about what she represented. Her poise and intelligence set a high standard for television hosts. She didn't shy away from serious topics either. In a 1951 mailbag segment, a viewer criticized her for discussing politics on air. Her response was simple yet firm. Politics is everybody's business. It was moments like this that made her more than just a glamorous figure. She had something to say, and she wasn't afraid to say it. Her personality made her a perfect fit for the rising popularity of game shows. Unlike today's game shows, which focus on big prizes, the ones in the 1950s were all about personality. Emerson became a regular panelist on To Tell the Truth and What's My Line, where celebrities tried to guess contestants' unusual occupations by asking clever questions. Emerson was quick-witted and playful, balancing humor with sharp observations. She didn't just sit back, she was an active part of the conversation, which made her a fan favorite. These appearances only added to her reputation as one of television's most versatile talents. In 1951, she took on a new challenge with Fay Emerson's Wonderful Town, a half-hour variety show that aired on CBS until 1952. Instead of filming in a studio, this show took viewers across the country, featuring different cities and their local cultures. When she visited Boston, she explored its rich history. In Minneapolis, she sat down with Senator Hubert Humphrey alongside actor Richard Carlson. Some episodes even went beyond the United States, bringing audiences glimpses of life in Paris and Mexico City. This format was ambitious and expensive, but it gave television something it had never seen before. Despite its success, the show was difficult to sustain due to the high costs of filming on location. Yet Wonderful Town proved Emerson wasn't afraid to push boundaries. She wasn't just following trends, she was setting them. Her contributions to early television earned her a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960, a recognition of her impact on the industry. Meanwhile, Fay Emerson's Broadway debut in 1948 was more than just another role. It was a turning point. She stepped onto the stage of the Booth Theater on April 28th in the play's The Thing, a comedy by Ferenc Molnar adapted by P.G. Wodehouse. The production ran for 244 performances, a clear sign of its success. Emerson starred alongside Lewis Calhern, a seasoned actor with a powerful stage presence. Directed by Gilbert Miller, the play was a light-hearted story of love, deception, and theatrical trickery. It followed a playwright's clever attempt to salvage a young couple's relationship, blending witty dialogue with classic romantic misunderstandings. For Emerson, this role marked a shift from Hollywood to Broadway, a move that carried weight. She had spent the 1940s building a film career, known for her glamorous looks and sharp wit, but Broadway demanded something different. It wasn't just about screen presence, it was about skill, timing, and live performance, where every moment counted. She proved she was more than a film actress. She had the talent to hold her own on a New York stage. The timing of this debut made it even more significant. By 1948, Emerson had become a household name, not just for her work in film, but also for her high-profile marriage to Elliot Roosevelt, son of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Stepping onto Broadway was more than an artistic decision. It was a statement. She was leaving behind the B-movie roles that had defined much of her early career. She was reaching for something greater. The success of the play's The Thing opened new doors. It proved she could draw audiences outside of Hollywood, setting the stage for the next phase of her career. Over the next decade, she would take on more ambitious theater projects, each one reinforcing her place as a serious performer. In 1953, Emerson joined a production that would become one of her most celebrated, An Evening with Will Shakespeare. This was no ordinary play. It was a theatrical event designed to showcase the best of Shakespeare's work, featuring a collection of scenes and monologues that highlighted both his comedic and dramatic genius. The production brought together some of the greatest stage actors of the time, including Basil Rathbone and Eva Le Gallienne. Emerson's presence alongside them was no small achievement. Rathbone was already famous for his portrayal of Sherlock Holmes, while Le Gallienne was an icon of American theater. Sharing the stage with performers of this caliber was a challenge, but Emerson rose to the occasion. She delivered Shakespeare's words with poise and precision, proving she was more than just a Hollywood star making a brief stop in theater. She belonged there. Beyond its artistic value, the production had a deeper purpose. It was a fundraiser to help build the Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut. Emerson's involvement tied her name to a cause dedicated to preserving classical theater in America. At a time when television was rapidly changing entertainment, she was committing herself to the stage. Critics took notice. They praised her performance, highlighting her ability to bring depth and energy to Shakespeare's characters. She wasn't just reciting lines, she was making them feel fresh, proving she had the range to tackle some of the most challenging material in theater history. Even as television became the dominant form of entertainment, Emerson remained committed to live performance. Throughout the 1950s, she continued acting in regional theater, starring in productions like Goodbye, My Fancy, and The Vinegar Tree. These roles allowed her to stay connected to audiences beyond Broadway, while continuing to refine her craft. In Goodbye, My Fancy, she played a strong-willed congresswoman returning to her alma mater. The play, written by Faye Emerson, had been adapted into a film starring Joan Crawford in 1951. But Emerson brought her own warmth and intelligence to the role. The story resonated with post-war audiences who were eager for stories about independent women balancing personal and professional challenges. Her performance earned praise from regional critics, who noted the depth she brought to the character. In The Vinegar Tree, she took on a very different role, showcasing her talent for both comedy and drama. The play centered on family dynamics and romantic entanglements, allowing her to connect with audiences on a personal level. It was a reminder of her versatility, proving she could handle both lighthearted and serious material with equal skill. These regional performances were more than just work. They were a way to keep theater alive in an era when television was pulling audiences away from live performances. While many actors were shifting to TV, Emerson remained dedicated to the stage. She believed in the power of theater and was willing to travel beyond major cities to bring high-quality productions to a wider audience. By the end of the 1950s, Emerson had established herself as a performer who could succeed in any medium: film, television, or theater. She wasn't just a Hollywood actress who had dabbled in Broadway. She was a true stage actress, one who had proven her talent time and time again. Meanwhile, Fay Emerson was a rising star in Hollywood when she met Elliot Roosevelt at a party in 1943. He was the son of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and married to his second wife, Ruth Googins. Their introduction wasn't by chance. It was arranged by Howard Hughes, the aviation tycoon and film producer who had a way of bringing powerful and famous people together. In the middle of World War II, when glamour and urgency mixed easily, their connection quickly turned into something more. It didn't matter that Elliot was still married. The spark between them was undeniable. And soon, their relationship became one of the most talked-about romances of the era. A little over a year later, on December 3, 1944, Fay and Elliot married at the Yavapai observation station overlooking the Grand Canyon. It was a dramatic setting, fitting for a Hollywood actress. She was in the middle of filming Hotel Berlin, and the timing made the entire event feel like something out of a movie. Howard Hughes played a major role once again, funding the wedding and even providing airplanes to make the occasion possible. Elliot was 34 years old. Faye was 27. This was his third marriage and her second. Just days after their wedding, Elliot left for Europe to continue his military service. He named his reconnaissance aircraft My Faye in her honor. But the distance between them was already growing. When Elliot returned, they lived for a time at Hyde Park with Eleanor Roosevelt. It was a shift from the glamour of Hollywood to the strict world of political life. But Faye adapted quickly. She even got along well with Eleanor, who was still serving as First Lady. Yet, despite her efforts to embrace the Roosevelt name, she wasn't someone who could simply step into the background. She was independent, ambitious, and determined to continue her acting career. The role of a Roosevelt daughter-in-law came with expectations, and Faye wasn't willing to sacrifice her identity to fit them. This growing divide between her and Elliot became impossible to ignore. By 1947, their marriage was falling apart. Elliot's infidelity was no secret, and Faye refused to abandon her career to become the devoted political wife others expected her to be. Their arguments became more frequent. The emotional distance widened. What had once been an exciting and glamorous relationship was now strained by personal and professional conflicts. The Roosevelt family wasn't pleased with how Faye carried herself, and she wasn't about to change to make them more comfortable. On Christmas Day in 1948, the weight of it all became too much. Faye attempted to end herself by slashing her wrists with a blade. She was rushed to Vassar Brothers Hospital in Poughkeepsie, where she was treated and released 2 days later. Publicly, both she and Elliot insisted it was an accident, but those close to them knew the truth. Their marriage had reached its breaking point. What had started as a whirlwind romance had become something painful and unrecognizable. Their divorce was finalized on January 17, 1950, in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Elliot moved on quickly, remarrying for the fourth time. Faye, however, focused on her career, transitioning into television, and becoming one of the early pioneers of the medium. Their time together had been marked by passion, scandal, and heartbreak. But in the end, they were better apart than together. Fay Emerson lived a life that was anything but quiet. By the time she entered her third and final marriage, she was already one of television's biggest stars. Known as the First Lady of Television, she had become a familiar face on talk shows and game shows throughout the 1950s. On December 12, 1950, she married Lyle Skitch Henderson in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Henderson was a well-known orchestra leader and television band leader who would later become famous as the band leader for The Tonight Show. Their wedding was a major event, drawing attention from both Hollywood and the music industry. As a couple, they didn't just share a personal life, they also worked together on television. From 1953 to 1954, they co-hosted Fay and Skitch, a short musical program on NBC that ran for 15 minutes per episode. It gave audiences a glimpse into their chemistry, both on and off screen. Their collaboration added to their fame, but also put their marriage under constant public pressure. They were in the spotlight as a glamorous and successful couple, but behind the scenes, things were not as perfect as they seemed. Their marriage lasted 7 years, but ended in divorce in January 1957. The split was far from smooth. There were rumors that Henderson had been unfaithful, and some sources claimed he was involved with teenage girls. These accusations were never officially confirmed, but they added to the tension surrounding the breakup. The divorce was finalized in Acapulco, Mexico. By that time, Emerson's career had already started to decline, and the end of her marriage seemed to mark the beginning of a new chapter. She stepped away from Hollywood and spent much of her time traveling, moving further from the entertainment world that had once made her famous. Even before her marriage to Henderson, Emerson was no stranger to controversy. In 1950, during a live broadcast of the Fay Emerson show, she wore a low-cut gown that slipped during the show, briefly exposing her chest on national television. This was decades before similar incidents would become common, and at the time, it was a national scandal. Some believed it was a deliberate attempt to gain publicity, while others saw it as an unfortunate accident. Either way, it became one of the earliest examples of a wardrobe malfunction in television history. Her fashion choices had always been bold, often pushing the limits of what was considered acceptable for women in the public eye. She continued to wear elegant but revealing gowns, drawing admiration from some and criticism from others. Her willingness to challenge expectations made her a polarizing figure. Some saw her as glamorous and confident, while others accused her of being too provocative. The wardrobe malfunction only added to the debate about decency on live television, showing just how powerful the medium had become in shaping public opinion. Beyond television, Emerson's connections to powerful figures also brought her name into unexpected scandals. In 1947, during a Senate investigation into Howard Hughes's wartime government contracts, she became part of the discussion in an unusual way. The investigation revealed that Hughes's press agent had spent $132 on nylon stockings for Emerson. At first, this seemed like a minor detail, but during World War II, nylons were a luxury due to strict rationing. The purchase had been arranged by John W. Meyer, Hughes's publicist, who had also spent thousands of dollars entertaining military officials and government figures, including Emerson's then-husband, Elliot Roosevelt. While Emerson was never accused of wrongdoing, her name was now linked to a much larger controversy. Fay Emerson had been one of television's biggest stars, earning up to $200,000 a year at the height of her career. But in 1963, after more than 2 decades in the spotlight, she decided to walk away. She wanted something different, something quieter. The constant media attention, the pressure to always be in the public eye. It had taken its toll. After her final television appearance, she left Hollywood behind and moved to Europe. Switzerland was her first stop. Its peaceful landscapes and neutrality made it the perfect place to escape the relentless scrutiny she had faced in America. For years, the press had followed every part of her life, including her 3 high-profile marriages. Living abroad gave her the privacy she had been searching for. She still returned to the U.S. from time to time, but only for business or the rare social event. By 1975, she was ready for an even greater change. She moved to Mallorca, Spain, settling in the small village of Daya. Daya was nothing like Hollywood. Perched on cliffs above the Mediterranean, it was an artist's colony, home to writers, painters, and musicians who valued creativity over fame. Emerson embraced the quiet life, keeping mostly to herself. She rarely gave interviews and made few public appearances. People in the village knew who she was, but she didn't talk much about her past. She had been one of the most famous women on television, yet in Daya, she was just another resident. During these years, she tried to write her memoirs, but they never reached completion. Maybe she struggled to put her story into words, or maybe she didn't like how they turned out. Whatever the reason, the book was never published. Aging also wasn't easy for her. She had once been celebrated for her beauty and elegance, and now she had to face the reality of growing older. She spoke about aging ungracefully, a phrase that hinted at the difficulty of letting go of the image the world had once had of her. Her past, however, was impossible to erase. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Fay Emerson had been a true pioneer. She wasn't just a talk show host. She was one of the first women to have her own program. The Fay Emerson Show ran from 1949 to 1951 on CBS and NBC, a time when television itself was still new. Only about 12% of American households owned a TV, but those who did watched her bring intelligence and sophistication into their living rooms. She was ahead of her time. Unlike most programs of the era, her show tackled serious topics: U.S.-China relations, women's rights, political issues. These were conversations rarely seen on television, but she made them part of her program. She also set the stage for future talk show hosts. Even Steve Allen, who later became famous for The Tonight Show, appeared on her show before launching his own career. Despite her accomplishments, the media often focused on her appearance rather than her talent. She was known for her daring fashion choices, and sometimes newspapers cared more about her low-cut gowns than the depth of her discussions. It was a frustrating reality, but one she handled with grace. Even though later generations might not have known her name, her influence lived on. Without her, figures like Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres might not have had the same path to follow. Fay Emerson passed away on March 9, 1983, at age 65. She died of stomach cancer in Daya, where she had lived for nearly 2 decades. Her home was a modernized stone farmhouse, surrounded by the artists and writers who had become her community. She had left Hollywood behind, but she had not been forgotten. News of her death appeared in major publications, yet it lacked the kind of attention one might expect for someone once called the First Lady of Television. By then, television had moved on, and new stars had taken over. But the foundation she built remained. She had proven that television could be more than just entertainment. It could be smart, engaging, and thought-provoking. Even in her final years, far from the spotlight, she remained a part of that legacy.